Your house is on fire. It's the year 60 A.D. You're in Rome, and there is no number to call, no sirens, no hydrants. Just you, some smoke, and a very bad evening. Who shows up to help? Ah, now that is a story. And since I spent a good portion of my life obsessed with this exact problem, allow me to tell it. Benjamin Franklin, at your service. Fair warning, it gets messy. Let us begin long, long before my time. Fire was mankind's first great invention, and roughly 11 minutes later it became our first great regret. The moment we started building cities out of wood and packing ourselves in close, one careless spark could erase a whole neighborhood before breakfast. Nobody learned this lesson more often than the Romans. Their city was, to put it politely, a magnificent pile of kindling. Wooden apartment blocks stacked high, open flames for cooking and light, and streets so narrow a fire could hop from roof to roof like an enthusiastic house guest. Fires there weren't disasters. They were practically a hobby. The first solution was elegant in its simplicity. A bucket. Well, many buckets and many neighbors standing in a line, passing water hand to hand toward the flames. Slow, exhausting, and almost always far too late. By the time the water arrived, the fire had usually moved on to a nicer address. Then along came a Roman gentleman named Marcus Licinius Crassus, fabulously rich, morally, let us say, flexible. And he looked at your burning home and saw not a tragedy but a bargain. Crassus kept a private brigade of some 500 men trained to fight fires. Impressive, yes. Here is the delightful part. When your house caught fire, his men would sprint to the scene and then do absolutely nothing. They simply stood there while Crassus offered to buy your burning house for a spectacularly insulting price. Agree to sell, and his men leapt into action. Refuse, and they watched it burn while he waited for you to reconsider, which on fire you tended to do rather quickly. It was extortion with a water bucket. It was also, technically, one of the first fire departments in history. I did say the story was messy. Rome eventually did better. After enough of the city burned down, the Emperor Augustus created the Vigiles around 7 A.D., a public brigade, thousands strong, patrolling by night with buckets, axes, and pumps. They fought fires and doubled as the night watch. For the first time, putting out fires was a public duty rather than a private shakedown. Progress. Then came 64 A.D. and the Great Fire of Rome. It burned for 6 days and took much of the city with it. The lesson written in ash. Once a fire gets loose in a crowded city, stopping it is very nearly impossible. Remember that. It comes up again. After Rome fell, organized firefighting mostly fell with it. For centuries, Europe went right back to the bucket brigade. Neighbors, panic, and a hopeful prayer that the wind would behave. It usually did not. Which brings us to London, 1666. A year that did not go well. In the small hours of September the 2nd, a fire began in a bakery on Pudding Lane. And London, bless it, was built like a woodpile that had learned to lean. Timber houses crowded so tightly their upper floors nearly kissed across the street. Perfect fuel. The fire caught, and it declined to stop. The Great Fire of London burned for 4 days. 13,000 houses gone, dozens of churches, tens of thousands left homeless. And the great firefighting strategy, tearing down and blowing up buildings to rob the flames of fuel. The humble bucket brigade, against a firestorm that size, was about as useful as a stern letter. But from those ashes rose a clever new idea, a profitable one, fire insurance. The logic was sound. If an insurance company had to pay out every time a building burned, it had every reason to stop the fire quickly. So the insurers formed their own fire brigades. And here the tale becomes truly absurd. When you bought insurance, the company handed you a metal badge to nail to your house, a fire mark. It announced to the brigade, "This one is ours. Save it." Now, picture the scene. A fire erupts. Several private brigades come thundering up. They squint at the burning building, hunting for a badge. If it is not their company's fire mark, some brigades would simply shrug, turn around, and go home. A few reportedly brawled with rival crews over who got to use the water while the house merrily burned behind them. Your survival depended on which little badge was nailed to your wall. Firefighting, but only for paying customers. Somewhere, Crassus was smiling. Now, cross the ocean with me to the American colonies, where at last we arrive at someone with sense, namely, me. I do apologize, but I did rather fix this. By the 1730s, I was living in Philadelphia, a fine city made almost entirely of wood and anxiety. Like every colonial town, it lived in quiet terror of fire. Being a curious sort and running a newspaper, I wrote about it. I pointed out that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. People assume I meant that as general wisdom. I did not. I meant it about fire, specifically. Please stop cross-stitching it onto pillows. In 1736, I founded the Union Fire Company, and the idea, if I may say so, was rather good. Not a private brigade for hire, not a service for the insured few. A volunteer company, ordinary citizens who agreed to drop whatever they were doing and fight any fire anywhere to protect the whole town, not just their own rooftops. Each member kept his own leather buckets and stout linen bags. The buckets for water, obviously. The bags for hauling your valuables out of the house before it became a bonfire. When the alarm rang, we ran. Neighbors, organized and equipped, helping neighbors. Revolutionary, I know. And I hadn't even gotten to the actual revolution yet. The idea spread like, well, you know. Volunteer fire companies sprang up across the colonies. My little model became the blueprint for American firefighting, community-run, volunteer-driven, and open to everyone rather than the wealthy few. To this very day, most fire departments in the United States are still volunteer. Every one of them a distant grandchild of that first Union Fire Company. You are quite welcome. I did not stop at organizing people, naturally. I pushed for fire prevention, sturdier building codes, and helped found one of America's first fire insurance companies. One designed, unlike our London friends, to actually prevent fires rather than merely profit from them. A radical notion. Insurance that wants you to live. Meanwhile, the machinery was catching up. The tired old bucket brigade gave way to the hand pumper, a wheeled tank of water worked with long pump handles that threw a genuine stream onto the flames. It still demanded a great many strong arms, but it was a real leap forward. Then, in the 1800s, came steam, and everything changed. The steam fire engine could pump harder and longer than any crew of men, needing only a few operators and a horse to haul it. The volunteers, proud of their muscles, resisted mightily. Nobody enjoys being told a boiler does their job better. But the steam engine won, as machines tend to. And so the horse became the great icon of the fire service, galloping through the streets with the engine roaring behind. Stations were built around the animals. And that famous sliding pole, invented so firefighters could reach the engine faster than the stairs allowed. Practical. I approve enormously. By the late 1800s, cities were building professional, paid, full-time fire departments. Real ranks, standard equipment, dedicated stations. Alarm boxes appeared on street corners wired by telegraph. Hydrants rose from underground pipes. The old circus of squabbling private crews finally gave way to a single, coordinated public service. Then the horses bowed out too, replaced in the early 20th century by the motorized fire engine, red, roaring siren wailing, the very machine you still see tearing past you today. So consider the journey. From a Roman crowd flinging buckets in the dark, from a scoundrel who bought your house as it burned, from London brigades checking for a badge before lifting a finger, all the way to a volunteer in my Philadelphia running toward the flames for the simple, stubborn reason that a neighbor needed help. Every siren you hear carries 2,000 years of hard-won lessons. That fire is everyone's enemy, and fighting it is everyone's job. So the next time an engine roars past, spare a thought for all the trial, error, and outright villainy it took to get here. A great deal of history, rather a lot of fire. And, if I may take just a sliver of the credit, one very sensible fellow with a bucket, a newspaper, and a bag for the good silverware. Good day.